Hello, and welcome to Select and Start, the podcast about meaningful and memorable video games. I'm your host, Keifer, and every episode I bring on a guest who selects a game that made an impact on their life. I have a wonderful guest with me today. He is a very wonderful and talented artist based right here in Savannah, Georgia. It's my good friend, Anthony Barbara. Anthony, how are you doing today?
Doing quite well, Keifer. How are you?
Oh, I'm doing well. Thanks so much for asking. Very excited to have you on the show because I feel like this is a game that has been a long time coming and with some pretty good timing because it just turned 20 years old a few months ago. Before we get into that, though, I want the listeners to get to know you a little bit. As I understand it, this is your first time being on a podcast, and I'm very happy to usher that in. I've had a lot of artists on this show, as an aside, and almost every single time it's like, yeah, this is my first time being on a podcast. And it's like, damn, we need more artists in audio. We need more visual media artists in a purely auditory experience.
I agree.
Yeah, so show me your portfolio so the listeners can't see it. No. Let's let them get to know you and who you are in spirit. What do you do and what do you like, Anthony?
I am a comic artist, illustrator, printmaker, toy designer. I do a bunch of different stuff. Mainly, I like doing stuff that is more cartoony, more jovial, lighthearted. It's been great to have a good community to connect with here in Savannah, Georgia, especially, and like just keep growing those skills and connecting with people through those.
Yeah. You being an artist and you work in like comic spaces specifically, who would you say your influences are, or like what do you try and look to when you're trying to find inspiration?
I look at it like a bunch of different artists. Stylistically, I draw a lot from Alex Toth, a handful of different European artists like Mobius and Matthew Bonham.
Hell yeah.
And then in terms of inspiration, like I'll look everywhere. Like movies, video games, of course, stuff I grew up on, stuff that like people recommend to me now. I'm always trying to like widen my palette and get as much of my like mental library as I can.
Right on. Now, you mentioned Alex Toth as one of those. Were you, like everybody else in our generation, watching a lot of Adult Swim, or did you get it?
Yeah. 100%. Yeah. Like he was one of those artists that like I only found out about him like when I like started taking illustration and art more seriously. And then I realized like how much of an influence his work had already had on my life. Growing up on a like watching Adult Swim and like Space Ghost, Venture Brothers, Harvey Birdman, like he created like the visual language that fed into those shows, whether like through like directly with like Space Ghost or like inspired by with like the Venture Brothers.
Yeah.
So like once I found out about like that he was the artist that was behind like those shows in a way or part of that lineage at least, I immediately like did a deep dive and started studying his work a lot more intensely.
Yeah. It's that like weird thing where it's like the formative memories just sort of like put us on a path to like loving something forever. I mean, you mentioned the Venture Brothers, which is like just one of my favorite works of media ever in terms of like building something out. It's like what Adventure Time also goes on to do in a different way, where it's like you build like a goofy world, and then from that there comes like an actual like continuity and an actual pathos and then character development and change within something that like just started in Venture Brothers case is like a parody of like Johnny Quest and like different like Alex Toth things from like the 70s and all that. And everything is like influenced by other things, but like it's like that interesting like little like dimension or spin that you put onto it that like makes it your own, right?
Absolutely.
And I love an opportunity where I get to just talk about Venture Brothers on a video game podcast of anything else.
Yeah, it like you bring up like Adventure Time too. That was another like one of my favorite shows growing up, and you bring up something about like the way that these shows like created a sandbox to play in, and then over time the way these shows like grew with the audiences in a way, starting out like a lot more simple and every episode's its own thing, and then like bring in the continuity and actually playing with all these pieces that you've that these creators have created for these shows. That's one thing I actually do try to do with my own work is start with like a good foundation, start with stuff that is fun, and then figure out how to bring more depth into it later on.
Right. Yeah. I love art. It's the ethos
Yes.
of me talking about video games for a long time. Is like, hey, let's talk about art in an interactive space, because the sandbox thing, right? It's like artists, whether they're doing it figuratively or literally, are kind of playing with toys. They're manipulating things and aspects of characters that are influenced by other things, and then they just move them around in this like play space. Video games is just an interactive medium, which is you literally playing with other people's creation, or like in some cases, like let's say something in a source engine, a mod perhaps made by some dude named Garry, where you can also make your own um, art or narrative stories, or just crude poses for character models, whatever. All this is to say, I meant to transition that into talking about video games, and instead I just went into talking about Gary's mod instead. Let's talk about video games. As we all know, nobody likes to gatekeep more than the gamers. So we need to check your credentials here at the top here, Anthony. You may be an artist, and you may be able to talk about art, but you also need to talk about video games. And we want to see what your background is in that. Who or what got you into it? What's been your relationship with it throughout the years? What is Anthony's portrait of a gamer?
My cousins got me into video games. I my earliest memories of video games is like playing the Game Boy. I remember my cousins, they had gotten like a game, like what was it, the Game Boy Advance. There was like the two versions. There was like the purple one that was like just a screen and like the buttons, and then
Right.
there was the one that like folded.
The
I think
clamshell one, yeah.
yeah, I think they got the clamshell, and then they gave me their like original, like not, I guess not the original, but like the first version of the Game Boy Advance.
Yeah. And then because they got the SP and you got the hand me down Game Boy
Yes,
Advance
yes.
function.
So
Okay.
I got the hand me down. Yes, and it was awesome. Like I
Mhm.
remember playing so many different fun games on there, and I think they were mostly side scrollers. Now that I think about it, but it was definitely like a whole new world that opened up to me. And like since then, like I've played so many different games and like so many different levels of complexity. For years, I was like purely into Nintendo and like playing stuff on like the GameCube or like the Wii later when that came out.
Yeah.
And then I found out about, I think it was Halo was like one of the first games I found out about that like wasn't on like the Nintendo. And there was something about that like blew my mind because I was like big into sci-fi. So then that led me to getting it was an Xbox 360 at that point. And then that just led into me playing a whole mad host of games. It was interesting not really playing games on the PC for the longest time because I would like see like YouTube videos of like mods and like games that were exclusive on there and always being like angry that they weren't coming to console. But still, I like there was so many, just it felt like endless amounts of content to play back then, and there still is today.
Yeah.
It's bountiful. It's incredible, like the amount of video games that are out there.
Too many, I would argue. Like too many good
Honestly,
video games.
honestly, there's not enough time.
I will never play every video game I want to play. I've accepted that. I'll never read every book I want to read, watch every movie I want to watch. But video games, especially, it's like, God fucking damn it. I'm glad that I made a video game podcast because it helps me play a bunch of stuff that I've been meaning to play forever.
Yes.
But it also makes me aware it's like, God damn it, there's too many of these things, because then it's like they keep making more, which is good and healthy for people who want jobs, right? It's just like let's like I'm not going to do like that monkey's paw wish of like I wish they would slow down, because different problem, right? But fuck, man, it's just like there's so many games that came out in the last 5 years alone. It's like I'm like Alan Wake 2 was a game I meant to play almost 2 years ago now, and I still haven't yet.
Yeah, like there's such like a time sink, but in like the best way. Especially when you have like a good one. Like it's just so engrossing and engaging, and like it changes the way you think even a little bit. I'll talk about that when we talk about the main game for the day, but
Mhm.
I remember like when I was a kid, I would get in like arguments with like family or like friends about like video games being a waste of time or something. And then I read something in a magazine about the way that like shooters increase people's like hand-eye coordination. And
Mhm.
I remember that blew my mind as a kid. I was like, "Oh my god, this is actually potentially like exercising my brain in a way that I had no idea it was. Changing the way you think, like tuning yourself into these different ways of problem solving.
For sure. My mom, for being a super religious conservative woman, that definitely like stunted my development a lot as a kid growing up. I something I'll absolutely always give her credit for is like she was very encouraging of playing video games. Partially for the reasons like at least I'm not going outside and getting murdered or whatever, but also like she would always like cite the hand-eye coordination thing. Like we got a Wii one Christmas and it's like this is tactile. It's like you're moving with the game. That's exercise. That's going to help you with coordination. They use this technology in the military, probably. I don't know. And I'm like, okay, cool. Wii Sports. I love Wii Sports. But going back a little bit, talking about some specific games a little bit. Do you remember the games that you were first playing on that Game Boy Advance?
I think Ice Age. Ice Age is my earliest gaming memory. Uh,
No, it's fine. Continue.
It was I that you played as, it was like a side scroller, and you played as, who is it, Manny the Mammoth. It was fun. It was a fun game.
Yeah.
Uh,
It's like not to like derail the conversation or anything like that, but like my little brother and I got so many of those like licensed tie-in video games for especially the Game Boy Advance. I had a Kim Possible Game Boy Advance game. There was the Scooby-Doo 2 Monsters Unleashed Game Boy Advance game, which is, if you watch the post-credit scene of Scooby-Doo 2 Monsters Unleashed, there's a cheat code that Scooby-Doo will give you on the Game Boy Advance. That is a true fact that you can look up right now. So many weird things. Like we had multiple versions because the handheld version and the console version were both different of the SpongeBob movie game. We had
yes.
the Game Boy Advance one and the GameCube version. But yeah, continue with your Game Boy Advance.
I remember playing a lot of, because they would port over like the old like Super Nintendo games onto there too. So I played a ton of Mario. It was like Super Mario World was like
Yeah.
my all-time favorite. It was like, that was such like a stylistically rich game, like amazing music and just fun gameplay, and like so many different like areas and like secret areas to explore throughout the like overworld as you went through. It was like such a blast playing those games. And like going on like car trips and like with those cousins that like originally gave me like my introduction to it. We'd all be like playing like different games, our own little handheld console, and like seeing like where each other were at, and we'd like trade cartridges and like play like a second save file. Like it was good times. It really was. There was something so magical about like the handheld experience.
Yeah.
Especially like the social aspect to it.
Yeah. I mean, Pokemon, right?
Yeah.
Did you ever go on a school field trip as a kid where they got like a not school bus? Like they got like a nice bus and then you all went to like a field trip somewhere and you were allowed to bring video games with you because it'd be like an hour to 2 hour trip?
Yeah. It was it wasn't on a bus, but we took the train to I forget, I think it was a zoo or something. But on the train ride, it was like, oh, it was when like the DS was out. So like everyone had their DSs, and like you're hopping on Picto Chat and like sending stuff back and forth to people, and then like some kid sends something insulting, and then everyone's trying to figure out who it is because no one using their real names on there. And then the teachers get involved, and it was
Okay.
yeah, like it was just I like what once the like it felt like a weird like early version of social media in like a strange way. Yeah, that was.
Yeah,
I haven't thought about that in a while.
I've never been in like a pick-to-chat room with more than 4 people who are all next to me, but
Oh my, yeah, it was like 30 or something more, probably. It was a lot. It was like a big class trip. Yeah.
because I remember going like it was like a 2000. I was like in 5th grade field trip to it was I think Jamestown or Colonial Williamsburg because we had like the nice bus for both those trips. I grew up in Virginia, so it's like Jamestown and Colonial Williamsburg. Those were the 2 elementary school trips, and we were allowed to bring our video games on there. But like it was like a month before I would get a Nintendo DS Lite, and we were just like playing like Game Boy Advance games next to each other. We were doing like, hey, let's do 2-player Pokemon, but also like I had like a bunch of Dragon Ball video games. Like there's Dragon Ball Origins on the Game Boy Advance and Dragon Ball Z Boost Fury, which had like a 2-player mode that didn't really do much except hit each other, but it was a blast. And yeah, just the nostalgia of the one nice field trip you all get.
I don't think we always wanted the link cable, me and my cousins,
Hmm.
because there was like a handful of games. I forget which one of the it was like the Legend of Zelda game with like the four.
Four Swords.
Yeah, Four Swords. Yeah, we like because my cousin had that, and we all really wanted to play like the multiplayer aspect of it, but we didn't have the cable. I don't think they ever got the cable.
But you also talked about like playing other consoles too. What are some of your other favorites growing up?
My favorite console is definitely the GameCube.
Nice.
Something about like that era of Nintendo games, and they're I don't know how to like describe it.
Tropical almost.
Yeah, well, yeah. So there was that. There was like a lot. There was like they were just playing with. We were talking about like playing in like a sandbox once you've already like made the toys. I felt
Mhm.
like that was an era where they were really having fun with their characters, with their IP. In the world of Mario, there was a tropical adventure and a Ghostbusters adventure, and then all the crazy stuff that was going on in Paper Mario, The Thousand Year Door. It was so imaginative and fun. And even within like the Mario Party games from that time, I forget which numbered Mario Party it was, but there was like this whole like this garage area where you could like build up your vehicle for one of the
Mario
mini
Party
games.
5.
Yes,
I talked
yeah,
about this like a few episodes ago. Yes, continue.
yeah, and like there was like a funky character, like a star with glasses or something that was like the one managing the shop or something. Like there was like a lot of like just really fun like aesthetic on top of like what was already a very fun game. And it's interesting like when I look at like especially like Mario today, it feels a little bit more sanitized in a way compared to a lot of those games I remember growing up. And that doesn't mean they're not fun. Like I still love Mario and like those games.
Big fan of Luigi, if you know what I mean.
Yeah.
Continue.
But I really appreciated that era of Nintendo and like how much fun they were having with their characters. But yeah, like the GameCube was I mean, it just felt like such a special time, and I think that because it was like my first console and like
Mhm.
getting introduced to like a more like complex world of video games compared to what was like available on like the mobile devices at the time. I think the one I probably played the most of was my Xbox 360 though.
Right, because then you got into Halo and stuff.
Yeah, so like see Halo was like insane to me. Like I found out about Halo because of the game Halo Wars, which was like the RTS.
The strategy game, yeah.
Yeah, they made like an RTS, but because that one was rated T, they were able to put commercials onto like the kids channels. So I saw a commercial for it one day and I was like, "Oh my god, what is this game? I have no idea what this is." I think I asked for it for Christmas that year, and my dad got me Halo Wars, and he was like, "You're not gonna believe it. There's also this other Halo game called Halo 3." I was like, "No way! More? I don't even know what this is, and I already have two of it."
Oh my god.
But that like opened a whole like franchise to me, and like that was what introduced me to like online gaming with like Xbox Live and like the multiplayer that was part of Halo. Cause I mean, it was so many things that introduced me to like first-person shooters I had never really played before, RTSs I never really played before. Online gaming wasn't even a thing I imagined at the point. And then like in Halo 3 they had the whole forge mechanic of like making your own maps and like modifying these like the existing sandbox that they already had, and then they later released maps where they were like which was like a total sandbox just for you to build whatever the hell you wanted. That was such a cool world to jump into. It blew my mind at the time, and it kind of blows my mind thinking about it now. It's just such a rich sandbox.
Yeah, no, I mean, I remember being, I guess as far back as elementary school, kids were all over Halo because that was especially Halo 3 when the Xbox 360 and all that came out. Like, yeah, I would go to like soccer fields over the weekend because my stepbrother played soccer and my stepmom played soccer. They would just be talking about Halo, and it's like I have a Wii, but Halo to me is an example of like my friend. I play that at my friend's house. I went over to like the neighbor across the street from my dad, and I would go and play Halo 3 a lot with them. So I have like a shit ton of nostalgia for Halo 3, even though I never owned the game before, just because we would just do local multiplayer and like do like, hey, we're doing a round where we're just doing swords or just doing the hammer.
Yeah, like I think about like even before I knew about Xbox Live or like had it, the multiplayer just with like your friend or like two other friends, like I think 4 players was the maximum you could do locally, was a blast on its own. And like we would like run around and like we'd pretend that there was like armies of enemies coming at us and we'd be shooting at like nothing. Like there was like it's just fun. It's just like pure like fun that you could have with that multiplayer.
I wanted to ask, since we're already like veering dangerously close to this subject, do you ever watch Machinima?
Yes. Like I mean, like that was a whole other world of video games that like blew my mind. Was people using the sandbox to create content and like make movies, and like I always loved the idea of Machinima.
Mm-hmm.
Red versus Blue was like one of those series that like I was a hardcore fan for years when they were like making new seasons, and like I would like go back to the like original seasons and like rewatch those, and I think that might have been like the first time I saw anything of the previous Halo games. Even while playing the story in Halo 3, I didn't really question what had come before in the first 2 games. I just kind of like, I was like, oh, I guess this is happening. I'll try to figure it out.
He was finishing the fight.
Yeah. It's like we don't need to know. Like we're here now. But
going back and playing like the first one, because I remember like I did also did the campaign multiplayer with my friends and like everything like that. It's like, what do you mean the Arbiter wasn't always a good guy? What is this?
Yeah, like I think Red versus Blue was like my first exposure to like what the original 2 games looked like. So then I was like, oh, I want to play those. And then when I found out that the Xbox 360 had that like backwards compatibility with the original Xbox games, that was like a wild eye opener to me, because I was used to like the way Nintendo was doing it, where every single console had like an entirely different format of cartridge or disc. That the idea of like, oh, these is the same thing, you could just put it in and it'll work. Like it was again, it was like weirdly mind-blowing at the time. But yeah, then like going back to those older games and playing through those, and like it's always interesting going through video games in a non-chronological order because of the way the developers have just figured out how to tighten things up over time. When you go back to the earlier iterations after you've been introduced with the later, like there's that like adjustment of like the jankiness.
Yeah. I think playing the Game Boy and the DS especially trained me to be able to understand that kind of stuff, because it was an inherently limited device. It had an A and a B button, the pads, the shoulder buttons, and it's like it was a little Super Nintendo that you held in your hand. So I was playing things like Link to the Past that wasn't as detailed as Ocarina of Time, Majora's Mask, Wind Waker, Twilight Princess all were, but it was in my hand and it was a lot of fun. And like what else? Like The Legend of Zelda Minish Cap. That wasn't an older game, but it was like that and A Link to the Past being on the same device. It's like, yeah, older games can be great. Super Mario World, Yoshi's Island, all that stuff, amazing. To me, as a kid, it's just different flavors of the same thing. I'm not thinking about the video game history. That's a great way to
put it.
Yeah. But yeah, the other thing with like Halo, right? Again, this is weird that I have so much nostalgia for it, but I was thinking about like, oh yeah, the Machinima stuff that I was watching, Red versus Blue, or even stuff that wasn't, I mean, it was still fan stuff like RB and the Chief.
Yeah, stuff that was like, it wasn't explicitly like made in the video game, but it had to do with the video game. Yeah, Army and the Chief was such a weird show.
Yeah. But all this stuff was coming out around the same time,
yeah,
and
that was like the internet culture around video games at the time.
yeah.
And like I still remember going on to like the Machinima YouTube channel like it was probably like every day at one point, just like seeing like what they had put up.
Or there was this time where you went to other websites besides YouTube to watch videos, like the College Humors and the Rooster Teeths and Funny or Die
Yeah,
stuff, and
yeah.
all this like ecosystem stuff. And it's like, as a kid, I just like video games, so I'm just watching anything related to video games on these different
Yes.
services, and that just also is a thing that's like informing my sense of humor. This weird one, what was it called, like Sonic for Hire, where Sonic is just a deadbeat crossing over with other Sonic and video game
Yes, I
characters.
remember that one too. Well, that was the stuff that started blowing my mind was when I was seeing people make these like fan animations.
Hmm.
Because at like a certain point it stopped being like you were using like the video game as like a tool to like do animation or movie making. And people were like making completely original content using the aesthetic of these video games. I remember when like Red versus Blue started like doing their own like motion capture and like animation like in like the Halo style, and then like Sonic for Hire was another one of those. There was this Newgrounds series. I'm trying to remember now.
Yeah, Newgrounds,
Uh,
fuck.
Newgrounds was a whole like other ecosystem of like animation and like video game references and like fan content. Like yeah,
Those are all the people doing Adult Swim now. It's like
yes.
it's crazy.
Yeah, truly.
Video games and its consequences. Jesus Christ. Continue.
I mean, this might be a good time to segue into Half-Life.
If you say so.
Well, because like the way I found out about Half-Life was because of Machinima. And Machinima was this great way for me to find out about other video games that I just had no idea about, because I would watch like someone make a comedic video or a serious video in some game I had never seen before, be entertained by them, and then I would ask myself, well, I know these other machinimas were made in video games that I do know. What's this game I don't know? And one of those was the Half-Life games.
Yeah. It's an interesting one, the Half-Life games, because Garry's Mod, this game where that it's just like you have the source engine, which is what Half-Life 2 is built off of, and then people are making these videos that range from stop motion of video game models to just like different forms of puppetry moving around models that have gone limp using art assets imported into this game. That was my first exposure to a lot of stuff, was like watching like Team Fortress 2 videos, or kids they have Skibbity Toilet now, which is
Skibbity Toilet blows my mind that it has become as popular as it had. Because like I see that and I'm like, wait, you're telling me like a YouTube poop machinima is like the most popular thing on the internet right now? That's insane.
Every kid under like 15 years old will just say skibbity like it's an adjective, and it's like I was there when this stuff was forged and people were just making Gordon Freeman make his mouth very funny using the rig stuff in Garry's Mod, or just make the TF2 characters do funny dances. And now there's just this whole like you can go to the store and buy a Skibbity Toilet toy, or there's Skibbity Toilet in fucking Fortnite, and it's just like
the Skibbity when I saw the Skibbity Toilet toy, I had so many questions. Who is getting like the royalties? Like, is it the Skibbity Toilet creators that are getting like the full cut? Is Valve getting a cut because that's like an asset they created? Is the guy who provided his original face model from 2004? Does he know? Does he know that his face is inspiring new language in the lexicon of our youth?
Yeah. Like a kid playing Half-Life 2 for the first time, the second character model they see is like, that's fucking Skibbity Toilet.
Yeah, like that's what I'm thinking.
We can look down at like the younger people that like, Jesus Christ, you kids, but I'm genuinely like, it blows my mind a little bit, because it's just like to me, it's just like I unfortunately get this on a primal level because I
Yeah,
watched YouTube growing up, and this
100%.
is this is just a source filmmaker video that just appears to be Coco Melon for kids raised on iPads instead of Netflix or whatever. God, Jesus, it's
I
just their
love it.
salad fingers or some shit.
Yeah, no, that's the thing. Like we had our like weird ass shit that didn't make any sense. It was weird
Mhm.
as hell and creepy as hell at some points, and we made it through. Like it's gonna be okay. Every generation's got to have their their nonsense.
I don't know how many people listening who go out of the way to listen to my podcast made it through okay. I barely made it through okay, but yeah. Before we go into Half-Life 2 a little bit here, you talked about the Halo series. We talked about Machinima. We talked about the various videos and entertainment that have become an art form unto themselves. What are some other video games that mean a lot to you?
Ooh, the Fallout games are definitely like some of my all-time faves. I played both Fallout 3 and New Vegas on the Xbox 360, like around the time those came out. Played like through all the expansions in both of those. I think I 100%ed the achievements on both of those.
Yeah, wow.
I was very proud of that at the time. I was like, "Oh my god, I 100%ed these games. Let's go." Unfortunately, I never did that with Halo 3. I was one achievement off.
Do you remember which one?
It was get a double kill with the Spartan laser in Free for All.
Oh man.
I came very close one time, and I never did it. I think at one point, this was like a couple years ago, probably like 4 or 5, they announced that they were like finally going to shut down the servers for the Xbox 360 games. And I was like, am I going to go back and do it? And I had this like moment of like acceptance where I was like, no, I'm never gonna 100% Halo 3.
That's like a small side I want to like talk about a little bit.
Yeah,
That generation, the Xbox 360, PlayStation 3 generation, where there was like compulsory multiplayer and a bunch of stuff. I had PlayStation 3, but I really like single player games.
yeah.
I didn't do a ton of multiplayer games. So whenever like I looked at the achievement list and it was like in multiplayer, it's like I'm not getting platinum on this one. That isn't. I'm not getting a platinum on that one, I guess.
Yeah,
Especially because like
no,
every
like
fucking game had a multiplayer for whatever reason. I think Batman Arkham City had a multiplayer. What are we doing?
I mean, it was annoying for a handful of those games because, like, I remember in Halo Reach, there were a couple of achievements that were tied to the one of the map packs that came out, and then one of those like game modes or maps they added like wasn't popular, so they just took it out of the rotation. But there
Hmm.
was like still achievements that were like specific to that game mode that they added. That you're just not. It's like going to be like once in a blue moon that you actually get to play it.
Yeah. Self-correcting here was Batman Arkham Origins with a multiplayer mode. So
Gotcha.
don't write in haters. But it's yeah, no, like I remember the discourse about like should we make multiplayer and single player achievement things separate? And it's like I think now as an adult, I'm like, I mean, do achievements matter as much as we make them matter?
Well, like in the real world, no. I think at one point they were considering giving you like some sort of reward for your gamer score on the 360 or one of the Xboxes, but I don't think that ever manifested into any actual like meaningful reward. But when you're a kid growing up, like it's great to have these like extra challenges to aspire to. I'll like see games that will like do they'll have like a little like optional challenge on certain like missions or levels that like or like there'll be like the you'll get like an S tier rank when you finish like a mission. But none of that for whatever reason gives me the same rush as like that little bloop at the bottom of your screen, achievement
Yeah.
unlocked, like get like some arbitrary number of points for whatever you did.
You beat level 1. It's like, I beat level 1. Look at that.
Yeah. Well, that was so annoying too. It'd be like some games that were just like the most bare bones, no challenge you get achievements for. Felt so cheap. Like I want to earn that those digital points.
Right. Let's talk about the video game that you ultimately settled on. It's a video game that changed the world. Without it, we would not have Skibbity Toilet.
Very true.
It, this this game is like so influential, like on video game development, but it did affect generations and like how we consumed stuff on the internet and how we purchase video games on the internet. It is so difficult to talk about this game's legacy, but we're not here to talk about legacies. We're here to talk about how these games make us feel. And the game that you feel close and personal to is Half-Life 2. Half-Life 2 is a first-person shooter game developed and published by Valve Corporation, also known as Valve Software or simply as Valve. It is the long-anticipated sequel to the company's very first video game, Half-Life. This is the third Valve game I have covered on the show. I've previously talked about Portal with Adequate Emily and Portal 2 with Bailey Myers. Half-Life 2 was a video game that was made by a team of around 100 people, voice actors included. We unfortunately cannot talk about each and every individual person, especially with the way that Valve handles credits. They don't actually credit like what each person did. They just credit the entire staff of Valve in their video games. But some key figures we can shout out here are Viktor Antonov, who was the game's art director, a Bulgarian man who was the one who made the pitch to use Eastern Europe as sort of the setting for the majority of Half-Life 2. And that sort of like inspired the direction and the aesthetic appearance of the whole thing. Kelly Bailey, who did all of the music and sound effects for the original Half-Life, returned to do the music and sound effects for the sequel. The game was developed using the Source engine. This was the first video game to use the Source engine, which was created in-house by Valve for this game and would go on to be used in things like in other Valve games like Team Fortress 2, the Portal series, the Left 4 Dead series, and it would be used in Garry's Mod, which is just a literal sandbox, not a literal sandbox, but like a sandbox type video game where people just put mods in for the Source engine and they would just do all their... It's difficult to describe what Garry's Mod is because it is...
Garry's Mod is like everything. It's like what... I never played Roblox, but like hearing the way that like friends or like kids play like Roblox today, like it reminds me so much of like the experiences I had with Garry's Mod.
Right.
Sandbox games like that are incredible.
Yeah, it's just a game built around user-created content, and that sort of spun out into being a sort of art piece where people were able to make silly videos moving physics objects around, but it was also a thing where people could just do like jail roleplay. But Half-Life 2, yeah, basically the originator of the Source engine. It was the game that they were developing the Source engine alongside this game. And as such, a lot of the gameplay is built around showcasing the Source engine and how it works and the physics of it. The Havoc physics engine was integrated to simulate real-world physics for this game and sort of became like the guiding design principles building things around physics, which makes sense because Gordon Freeman himself is a physicist. Half-Life 2's story was written by Mark Laidlaw, who also wrote the original Half-Life. Talking about the story of this game is a bit difficult because it is a game that wants to convey its story through visuals and through interaction rather than through exposition. So I'm going to do my best here talking about the story. Like the original Half-Life, the story of its sequel is told entirely through the perspective of the player character Gordon Freeman, a theoretical physicist who was kept in stasis for 20 years by an enigmatic figure known simply as the G-Man, who quote-unquote recruits Freeman following his quote-unquote performance review of dealing with the Zen creatures during the Black Mesa incident. The game begins with the G-Man waking up Gordon from stasis and teleporting him onto a train headed for City 17, a former Eastern European city repurposed to be the capital city of an alien organization known as the Combine, who has conquered and colonized Earth immediately following the events of Half-Life. The human population has been greatly diminished and neutered, and they are now under an oppressive regime by an unseen alien force. As Gordon arrives in the city, we see obvious signs that this is an oppressive regime, with omnipresent surveillance carried out by floating drones and masked civil protectors who terrorize the uniformed civilians in the area. Massive screens and speakers installed in nearly every corner of the city play messages from Dr. Wallace Breen, who the Combine have designated as the human leader of Earth to carry out their policies and spread their propaganda. As Gordon is ushered through several checkpoints in a dilapidated city covered haphazardly with alien technology, he is pulled aside by a familiar face, Barney, who was a security guard from Black Mesa. He tells you to find the lab of Dr. Isaac Kleiner, who also survived the Black Mesa incident. Along the way, Gordon is assaulted by Combine officers conducting an apartment raid, but is rescued by Alex Vance, the daughter of Dr. Eli Vance, the leader of the resistance movement of primarily former Black Mesa employees who survived the aforementioned incident. After taking out the Combine forces who attacked Freeman, Alex leads him to Dr. Kleiner's lab. Kleiner outfits Freeman with the HEV suit he wore during his last adventure and attempts to teleport him to the resistance base when a malfunction caused by his pet head crab sends you to Dr. Breen's office instead. With the Combine alerted to his presence, Freeman must fight through the waves of civil protection officers trying to hunt him down while he travels by foot to the Black Mesa East resistance base. Physics-based shenanigans ensue. Half-Life 2 was released in 2004, and 2004 was evidently the year of twos, because in addition to Half-Life 2, we also got Halo 2, Metroid Prime 2 Echoes, Pikmin 2, The Sims 2, Sly 2 Band of Thieves, Spider-Man 2, the movie video game, Star Wars Knights of the Old Republic 2, Tony Hawk's Underground 2, Paper Mario The Thousand Year Door, which was the second game in the Paper Mario series, and Tom Clancy's Splinter Cell Pandora Tomorrow, the second Splinter Cell game. But that is not all. Other video games released in 2004 include Burnout 3 Takedown, Grand Theft Auto San Andreas, Pokemon Fire Red and Leaf Green, Ratchet & Clank Up Your Arsenal, Unreal Tournament 2004, World of Warcraft, and Counter-Strike Source. Also Metal Gear Solid 3 Snake Eater, which I previously covered in the very first episode of my show with my good friend Manu, aka Manuclear Bomb. I just mentioned a shit ton of video games. Anthony, have you played any of these?
Yes. I've played some of those.
Yeah.
That's awesome. There were so many twos that came out that year. It's very funny. Metal Gear Solid is also one of my favorite series.
Mm-hmm.
I never finished 3 though. I wish I would have. I could go back and finish it.
It's on everything now, so great time to check it out.
True, very true.
A lot of video games that came out in 2004 alone. Great year for video games. But of all the video games that you've ever played, you picked Half-Life 2 to talk about. So what made you decide on Half-Life 2?
Well, it just was the 20th anniversary of the video game, so it was very much on my mind. Watching the documentary they put out was so fascinating to like get this like in-depth look at one of my favorite video games, and then just like learn more about game development in general and like Valve's approach to it. When you mentioned that like you wanted to like bring me on and like pick a game for the podcast, I was like, well, like I got Half-Life on the mind right now. I love talking about it already, and I'd love to talk about it even more right now that I got like fresh eyes on it.
Yeah. It's a game that means a lot to me. I've talked about it a little bit when I talked about the Portal episodes, but those games and Half-Life and Half-Life 2 were the games that made me really like playing first-person video games, a thing that I was actively against growing up. And
really?
I didn't have anything against it. Like, I liked playing Halo 3 at other people's houses, but for me, it was just like, I like it when it's third person. And I didn't really have like any logical reason behind it, just other than like a taste preference. And
yeah.
It's the same way that people are resistant to eating vegetables. You know, it's just not to say that Call of Duty's vegetables by any means, but
no, but you do need something that introduces you to like the wider world that like gives you like a taste for it. That's cool that it was Half-Life. That's really cool.
Yeah, just some of the best games ever made. That's the thing, right? I especially as I was like becoming a teen into an adult, I started to understand things as like an art form. There's intentionality behind it. When things are, I just try to engage with things beyond how like, oh, like it's first person, that's bad, or it's third person, that's good inherently. So I was just trying to like expand, and I'm really grateful I did, because car driving by. Valve especially just had this really unique design philosophy, and without it, I wouldn't have gotten into things like Team Fortress 2, which is like one of my most played video games ever.
Same.
Yeah.
I had so many hours on that one.
God. Yeah. But this is, I'm glad you picked this, because it was recently the 20th anniversary, and I didn't do a lot of like background talking about Half-Life 2's development because it is maybe one of the most documented developments ever. There's beyond the 2-hour documentary that just came out from NoClip that Valve posted for free on their YouTube channel. They also have this book called Half-Life 2 Raising the Bar. There's also the commentary tracks that they released alongside the documentary that came out. There's just a lot of information on like the design philosophy and the development of Half-Life 2 that I would encourage other people to listen to because you get it straight from the horse's mouth instead of it being spit into my mouth and then spitting it into your ears or whatever this metaphor is going.
Game of telephone.
Yeah, that's better than spit. That's better. I prefer that. But let's go back in time a little bit. Do you remember when you first encountered Half-Life 2?
Oh my god. It must have been 2009. Yeah, because I remember I was watching, it was the Machinima series, Freeman's Mind.
Oh, yeah.
And I found out about it when, it was episode 10 of the series that came out, was when I first found out about it. So, yeah, it must have been 2009 I found out about, like, Half-Life. And then at some point I watched, like, some other Machinima videos. Also, so Freeman's Mind was made by Ross Scott, Accursed Farms on YouTube. He also has a website. He also did another Machinima series called Civil Protection, which was like a more comedic series set in City 17 of Half-Life 2. So I think that must have been my like first time I found about Half-Life 2. And then I forget what it was after that. I think I found out about the Orange Box like not too long after that. Because when did Portal come out?
2007.
Yeah, so the Orange Box must have been out for a little bit then, because I think that was all released together.
Yeah, it's one big bundle.
Yeah, so I think I saw the Orange Box at like GameStop or something, and I saw like, oh, there's Half-Life 2. Oh wait, I've heard about Portal. What's this Team Fortress 2 game? I don't even know what that is. Which that is really funny to think back on playing Team Fortress 2 on the Xbox 360. Like,
yeah.
But yeah, like I must have like around 2009, 2010, I must have gotten the Orange Box and finally got to experience this game that I had like seen so many different weird facets of on the internet through like Garry's Mod, through these different Machinima series, through like I'm sure I saw some like Rooster Teeth video where they talked about like achievements or like things to do in the game. Yeah, I forgot what the question was.
What was your first encounter? Yeah.
Oh yeah. So that was it.
God, you're making me remember like my history because I remember I looked at my Steam achievements list to see like when exactly did I first start playing Half-Life 2, and the answer is January 6th, 2013, because that's when I got the throw the can at the I didn't throw the can in the trash, I threw the can at the guy.
Pick up that can.
And that was the first achievement I ever unlocked in Half-Life 2, and that's dated January 6th, 2013. So I was 16 years old when I first played Half-Life 2. But I'm thinking back, like, how did I find out about this game? I was vaguely aware of Portal for a while because the cake is a lie. It's just, I was omnipresent online then, and you would watch just video, like even things that weren't video game related would reference it in some way, like stuff like abridged series from other, based on other animated series, stuff like that. A whole other YouTube genre that we don't have time to get into right now. I was aware of Portal, and I was aware that it came on the Orange Box, but I didn't really think much of like the other things on there. I remember January of 2010, I watched a YouTube video called Nope.avi, which is a video where the blue engineer from Team Fortress 2 walks across the screen, stands right in front of the camera, goes, "Nope," because his construction hat is floating above his head. So in response to that, he extends his neck into the hat. And that is also one of the first seeds of Skibidi Toilet. Because Skibidi Toilet also has a long neck. So, January 12th, 2010, the day the world changed. But yeah, I watched Nope.avi, and that made me like watch more Team Fortress 2 videos, which got me more interested in Team Fortress 2, which got me more interested in Valve games. I would eventually get a Steam account and play Portal. Somebody gifted me Portal right as Portal 2 was coming out. And then again, that just puts me down this dark path to where I'm here today. So I was 16 years old when I finally played Half-Life 2 for the first time.
I like thinking back now, I feel like I must have played Portal before Half-Life. Because I think I got Portal on its own because they had it on the Xbox store. They had it just on its own. So I probably played Portal first, and then I found out about the Orange Box. Like played Portal again, but then also played Half-Life 2. And then the episodes. Yeah, that was such it blew my mind when I got that too, because like I think I remember telling my cousin like, oh yeah, I got this game that has like 5 games on it. And he was like, that's illegal.
Illegal.
That's illegal.
This kid finding out about Super Mario All-Stars. They did what?
It was interesting, like, listening to the documentary and hearing like Valve's like design philosophy, because it was something I'd heard before, but like it was like a little bit more of like a fresher take in the documentary, where they want to like push the envelope with their games whenever they make something new and like try out new mechanics, try out new stuff with the physics system, really like deliver on making something special for their customers. And Half-Life 2 is just this like, if in a weird way it does feel like a tech demo, but in like a more like grand fashion.
Yeah.
Where there's vehicle sections, there's funky physics puzzles, there's a lot of fun shooting and gunplay, and like all these like different weapons that you get throughout the game. Yeah, it's there's a lot to love in like throughout the story.
It throws a lot at you. It's like there is the requisite shooting that you expect out of a first person game and a sequel to Half-Life, but it is throwing there's a lot of platforming, there's a lot of driving sections, it introduces puzzles around the physics of the game. It has this pace that isn't just level based, shoot, get to the end of the level, move on to the next level. It is telling a story through the source engine. And yes, it's like it is a engine showcase and it is a tech demo or whatever you want to call it, but it is doing a great job actually like telling a story and propelling the player forward through that, while also showcasing different game design ideas and just different things to keep the pace interesting.
Yeah, I love a lot of like the environmental storytelling in the game. And then like the way like the environment kind of clues you into certain mechanics you might want to try. Like when you go to Ravenholm and you walk into that first like interior, and there's like the saw blade stuck in the wall, and there's like a dead zombie like hanging on top of it, and you're like, oh, like you could cut these guys in half with that. And then you just got the gravity gun, so you pull it off the wall and then you turn the corner, there's all these zombies, you try it out, you see them split in half. Like it just introduces these mechanics in such like an organic and like satisfying way. It was really interesting in the documentary hearing them talk about how they would develop like a more complex physics puzzle, like a ramp or something that you have to like bring up with the I think it's like the ramp you have to bring up with the blue barrels because they like float in the water. And they talked about like they would develop like that like big physics puzzle, and then they'd be like, well, how do we introduce this to the players in like a simpler way early on in the game? So then they would go back earlier and they would develop this like tiny little teeter-totter where you have to like stack the cinder blocks on one end to like weigh it down and jump up and like do like a little bit of platforming. I just think that's such a cool just like a cool like thing to like learn about in game design, is like how do you like organically and like slowly teach the player how to do these things before you give them the chance just to figure it out on their own. And then, but even then, like there's no like on-screen prompt for that like teeter-totter. You still kind of figure it out on your own, but it's in like a small scale. No one's shooting at you, no one's chasing you. And then later on, like when you're in Ravenholm and you're getting swarmed by zombies and there's these like physics traps and like stuff you could like throw around, like you realize that like throughout like from the point of that teeter totter puzzle to that point in Ravenholm where like you have like a mastery of physics or like what feels like a mastery at that point. There's been this like slow, gradual training that you've been doing like this whole time, like passively throughout all these different sections of the game. I just think that's such a cool thing.
Yeah. They do such a good job keeping the immersion going and keeping that perspective intact with Freeman. And a big part of that is by doing visual tutorials or having and there's a couple cases where like you're taught how to use the gravity gun with Alex, and it's just like she'll tell you how to do it, and it is a thing where the game stops you like, well, let's tell you how this works, but it is like Alex talking to you as a person and talking about like this button that on like the primary, and then the secondary thing is you do it this way, but she's
Yeah,
not
it's
using like
all
she's not saying press the right mouse key or press the left mouse button or anything like that.
what's it called in sound design? There's like diegetic sound
Mm-hmm.
where it's stuff that's like happening like in the actual world in like the scenes.
Yeah.
I think that's like such a cool thing in a video game where it's meant to be this like immersive in control experience that the cutscene like there are cutscenes in a way in this game where like there's like people are just talking, there's exposition, but you are still like fully in control. Like you're not locked into a movie. Like if you don't want to pay attention to what Dr. Kleiner's saying about teleportation, you can just like fuck off and go mess around with like the junk in his lab or like play with the little tiny teleporter on his desk and not even pay attention. It's cool that like you are always in control, even though you are kind of guided along and corralled into these like specific areas. But once you're there, like you could do whatever the hell you want.
But even then, they do a good job establishing that, oh, Freeman is kind of being guided by otherworldly forces, and he's like a pawn in like this greater plan that even he's not really
Yeah,
privy to. So
yeah,
they do a good job at least saying like, well, if you're mad about that, the game says this.
yeah. Even within the world, like yes, you are being corralled by the G-Man, and his whatever his plan is.
Yeah.
Yeah, that is cool.
They do just a really good job just finding like the things that are like a little sweaty about the game and at least finding some excuse or explanation within the world to,
Yeah,
present like
yeah.
why that is the case. Oh, Freeman isn't really a character, and there's just points where he's not really. It's irony that he's called the free man because he, like anybody else, is just his purpose isn't self-defined. He is a tool, he's a puppet, he's a pawn.
Mm-hmm. Like replaying it this time around, I didn't realize how much they reference like Gordon Freeman's last name as this like title, especially like in like the like last few chapters of the game where like the whole like revolution's happening. Freeman becomes like literally like, a symbol of freedom to the rebellion and to like the people of the city. When yeah, there is this like cosmic irony to it. I never thought about that. That's very insightful.
Yeah, I mean, like he is functionally a messiah figure, and that's useful to the G-Man for reasons that they aren't even fully explained. Because that's another like thing about this game that's so good is like there's no dramatic irony to the game. You as Gordon Freeman and Gordon Freeman the character, you know exactly the same amount about what's going on. You are never a step ahead of Freeman in terms of like anything unless you're literally replaying the game. And even then, the motivations behind stuff like the Combine and the G-Man, and even the motivations of the people that you are allied with, like Eli Vance and Alex and even Barney, we don't know like how much they've interacted with the G-Man across all this because they like say things that like could
Yeah, there's like
cryptically.
these little like nods and like winks that like some characters will do and say throughout Half-Life 2 and like the episodes later that like kind of clue you in that like, oh, you're not the only one that has interacted with this cosmic businessman. Like he's like dipping his hands into a lot of people's worlds.
The reason I'm telling you all this is because I'm playing both sides so that I always come out on top.
I've always thought that was cool. And there's even like there's even like an acknowledgement almost when you're talking to Eli in the second episode, or rather when Eli's talking to you. Um, he like mentions like oh, you know who I'm talking about, our mutual friend. and he's like talking about it, like it's pretty clear he's talking about G-Man. I always thought that was interesting that like has he talked about that with anyone else? Would anyone even believe him? Like you wonder about like is that how he got out of Black Mesa? Is that how Kleiner got out of Black Mesa? Is that how like is that why everyone has found themselves in City 17 of all places, because they've all been nudged by these cosmic forces?
Right.
It's cool in a game like Half-Life where the story does pretty much come second to the gameplay and like the sandbox and like these like interesting set pieces and like platforming elements and all that stuff. But like what little bits you pick up on through the like environmental storytelling, through like what the characters say, it's very like stimulating in a way where like it does get like it gets my mind going on like and asking questions like, oh, what does this mean? Oh, like he said that, does that mean this? Like it's like one of the most like fascinating video game worlds and stories to me, and for whatever reason, and like it's not even like the focus of the games is the story. It's just the story is like a vehicle just to like get you into these interesting points of gameplay.
Right. Like Half-Life 2 is just a miracle of a game for a lot of reasons. A really cool thing about like both the Half-Life 2 documentary and the previous Half-Life documentary that the same group NoClip did is we get all these like details about like how the development worked and their feelings at the time, and then like their feelings in retrospect, right? Half-Life 2 started as, okay, let's do a sequel to Half-Life. That is a very in-demand thing. We need to keep this company going. We need to make more games. What can we do? Let's go back to this. It's not really like they had a plan. It's very clear that they did not have a plan based on the fact, like, the character, it's interesting, right? Because Kleiner and Barney and Eli are all people who survived the Black Mesa incident, but they're all just based off of character models from Half-Life 1 that have been retroactively designed their own individual characters. So it's like the game is just casually like, yeah, these characters you all know and love. And it's like, yeah, because you saw their character models 50 different times, but you also saw them die in 49 horrific different ways.
Yeah, I think Eli is the only one that you could actually like pin to a specific NPC in the original game, because he mentions like, oh, the last time I saw you, I sent you up for help. And there is like a scientist that's like, go to the surface, tell them we're down here.
Gordon, you're alive. Thank God for that hazard suit. I'm afraid to move him and all our phones are out. Please, get to the surface as soon as you can and let someone know we're stranded down here.
Now let's see. The last time I saw you, I sent you up for help after the resonance cascade. I never thought it would take you this long to get back to me.
But yeah, like, Barney could be any number of security guards from the original game. Kleiner could be literally anyone. He might not even have been in that same part of the facility that you were in.
Right. Because Barney like is given a character with Half-Life Blue Shift, one of the spin-off games that Gearbox did.
Yes.
So they have that.
Yeah, but I don't even know if... I always hear people debate on whether or not those games are like canon and like whatever that means to Half-Life. But like it's funny because like the first thing Barney says to you is like, oh, about that beer I owed you. And like literally like I think like that's something that like any one of the security guards in like the first section of the game can say to you in the original Half-Life. So like that doesn't it weirdly doesn't narrow it down in it like at all.
Hey, catch me later, I'll buy you a beer. About that beer I owed you. It's me, Gordon, Barney from Black Mesa.
Yeah. Oh, he's referencing a line from the original Half-Life, and that's how I can tell that this is a former security guard from Black Mesa, because otherwise, like, there's no thing connecting it. But it does so much to just give you this buy-in that not that they planned it this entire time, but that this story is going somewhere and they're actually picking something up and moving the mystery of stuff forward. But the game never really answers anything so much as gives you a new set of questions, because it's not really interested in answering the questions. It's interesting in keeping you interested. It's like television that way.
Yeah, it's like a soap opera almost.
Like the G-Man was based off of the Smoking Man from the X-Files, which again, the TV show that didn't really have like a plan, but wanted to keep the mystery going because people were just interested in seeing where it was going to go. And then the writer's just like, we're kicking the can. We're going to keep kicking the can because we don't know the answer. But that's great because it makes for, like obviously like the hope is that you stick the landing, but not knowing is an art in itself. It is something that keeps us interested. We don't need to get all the answers because in the case of Freeman, that doesn't matter. It doesn't make Freeman feel like a character, but it makes you more immersed and it keeps you interested and it keeps you going, even because there's no real motivation for the player if he's just a pawn told what to do and he knows all the answers to everything.
Yeah.
Right. But being a pawn that doesn't know what's going on, you at least have the curiosity as the player. And Freeman has like the curiosity of a scientist to see these things through. We want answers.
Yeah, absolutely.
But like real life, answers just lead to further questions. It's very smart in what it's doing and how it's able to expand on stuff and make it feel like a complete experience, but also leave us wanting more. And that's why people have been going crazy clamoring for a sequel for so long.
Yeah, like it's wild how long like that carrot has been like dangled in front of fans for like an episode 3 or Half-Life 3, like whatever it may end up being if it ever comes to be. It was very interesting in the documentary actually seeing footage of what episode 3 could have been, or at least what they were planning at one point. And also very frustrating that like they were like, yeah, we didn't feel like we had anything special, and like they're showing like this cool like ice gun thing that they're doing, and like this like weird like blob monsters like that are like that can like absorb people and like throw physics objects around. So it's like, this is pretty cool. Like I don't know what you guys are talking. I think if that had come out back in, what would that have been, like 2010, 2011, like I think that would have killed. Like people would have loved that.
Yeah, but I like that they want to feel confident in what they're releasing, and I like that they were especially at the time they were making a shit ton of games. They stopped because it's like,
oh yeah, they were made Left 4 Dead instead.
Yeah, they did Left 4 Dead instead. They did Left 4 Dead 2. They did Portal 2 after that, Counter-Strike Global Offensive. And a lot of the stuff that it feels like a lot of the stuff from that episode 3 stuff was sort of carried over into Portal in some way with like propulsion gel and like the
I think they used like the same whatever like simulation they were doing for those blob monsters was what they used for the gel, which was really cool. And like I do really appreciate that about Valve, is that like they do take pride in their work. There is like an artistry and craftsmanship to what they're making, that they want to put out stuff that is special and like meaningful and that they know is going to be meaningful. And like and it's that thing you have to remind yourself that like their focus is on the gameplay. It's not about the story. But as like fans, like that's what a lot of us were like really clamoring for, was like, we want to know what happens next.
Right.
You set up all this intrigue. I mean, especially like leaving it off on this massive cliffhanger at the end of episode 2.
Yeah, that's the beauty. Like every single Half-Life entry has ended with a massive cliffhanger. That's like a massive, massive question mark. The only difference now is like instead of waiting 6 years or 1 year or 2 years, we have been going on, well, 13, I guess, but that Alex was a prequel. And now like it's technically been 17 years since episode 2 or 18. What year is it? Okay, it's 2025 now. And Half-Life 2 episode 2, was that 2007? Yeah, it was 2007 because that was part of the Orange Box, was a Half-Life 2 episode 2. So it has been 17 years and change since the last Gordon Freeman entry in the game, and then we're going on 5 years since Half-Life Alyx now. And some people are talking about the way that they're being so giving about stuff that they got rid of and how they updated Half-Life 2 so much that this may be pointing in a direction where we may be getting more Half-Life soon. And if that is the case, I'm very hopeful. But to me, it's like I'm well past the point where it's like I need this, and it's just more like I can't wait for whatever they release next, because they're definitely going to feel confident in it.
Yeah, genuinely. Like it's less about like what happens next in the story now, and now it is like, oh, I just want to see what Valve makes.
Yeah.
Because they do deliver. Like they have these incredibly fun and engaging games, and like whatever they are working on next, especially if it is like a new single player experience.
Yeah, they're working on Deadlock right now, which is a hero shooter / MOBA game that has.
Yeah.
But I'm interested to see what their next single player, if
Yeah,
anything, comes out.
There's something about like companies that like really care, like Valve, when they do create like single player experiences. Like those are the ones that like I really want to like set this time aside for, because I know I'm gonna get something special out of it.
Yeah.
They have that track record, and they, at least like from that documentary and like hearing their attitudes about like what they've done, what they want to do, like it seems like they still very much have that mindset. So I'm whatever it ends up being, like Half-Life or not, like I am excited to see what comes next from them.
Absolutely. The future is very important, but the present is also important. So let's talk about how people can presently play this wonderful game, Half-Life 2, in a segment that I like to do every episode called No Country for Old Games. Full disclosure, I am recording this segment separately from the rest of the recording because I wanted to be considerate of Anthony's time. So it's just going to be me talking for the next few minutes before we go back to the main discussion. As my listeners know, the subject of video game preservation means a great deal to me because I believe that video games are an art form and create experiences that leave some kind of impact on the people who play them. That is the entire premise of the show. Unfortunately, this means very little to publishers who have historically struggled with keeping their older games available on modern hardware. As time goes on, games that were once readily available to purchase and play become more and more difficult to acquire. In this segment, we are going to rate Half-Life 2 on a scale of A for available to ARG. And ARG is obviously me being frustrated at how hard it is to play this game, and is not me covertly advocating for piracy whatsoever. That's illegal. ARG. So at face value, this should be a simple open and shut conversation. Half-Life 2 was released for PC on Steam, a digital storefront and software client, on November 16th, 2004. And to this day, it remains available to purchase and play on Steam. Simple, right? Well, not necessarily. Let's talk about DRM. Digital rights management, or DRM, is the technology that distributors use to control the legal access to their digital content. Certain permissions or restrictions are embedded into software so only authorized users can access it. This type of technology can be used to protect sensitive or confidential information, but DRM is most commonly associated with the protection of copyrighted content. In the context of video games, this means when you buy a video game digitally on a service like Steam or the PlayStation Store or the Microsoft Store and so on, you're typically purchasing a license to play the game and not owning the game outright. Different companies use different forms of authentication when loading up a digital version. Some games require the entry of a personalized key code. Other games are required to be launched through a client or a service. Steam, Valve's digital distribution service, is one such client. More controversial examples of this would be services like Rockstar Launcher, Ubisoft Connect, or the now defunct Games for Windows Live. These would require sign-ons every time you launched a game, and in Games for Windows Live case, just never seem to fucking work right. Even worse are games with DRM that require persistent online authentication, or always online DRM. This means the player must remain connected to an online server even when playing in single-player modes, as was the case with games like StarCraft 2 or Diablo 3. Of course, the practice of DRM is not limited to digital copies of games. Physical copies of games can also have DRM, such is the case with today's game, Half-Life 2. If you purchase a PC CD-ROM copy of Half-Life 2, you are still required to download and install Steam. Why is this the case? Let's go back in time a little bit. Steam came about in the early 2000s as Valve wanted to make a platform that updated games automatically without requiring players to manually download and install new patches. Such a platform would also be used to mitigate piracy and cheating in online games. Valve announced such a product, Steam, to the public at the 2002 Game Developers Conference, with the president and co-founder Gabe Newell talking up the value of having a service that could eliminate the overhead costs of physical distribution. Newell said that the traditional system meant that a developer typically made $7 for each game sold, but an online distributor like Steam could net developers more than $30 per copy. The matter of reducing a middleman for publishing was particularly important to Valve because they were having issues with their publisher, Vivendi Games. Valve would go on to sue Vivendi in 2002 for breach of contract and unpaid royalties. The details of that legal battle are well documented, and I've included links in the description if you want to read more about it, but long story short, Valve won, got full control of their IP, and Steam became their road to independence without needing a middleman publisher. When Half-Life 2 released, we were still transitioning from dial-up to broadband internet. So downloading a AAA game like Half-Life 2 within hours wasn't quite the norm. This means, at the time at least, far more people were going to physically purchase Half-Life 2 than they were going to download it directly onto their computer. But they still had to install Steam, and installing an application to play a game you physically owned felt like an unnecessary extra step that ate up RAM for the sake of anti-consumer DRM. It was not popular at the time. Over time, though, Steam became more than a vessel for Valve products, and other publishers began to release games through Steam. On the Steam store, every game purchased permanently attaches a software license to a user's account. If you purchase a game on Steam, you can uninstall it and reinstall it as many times as you like, even if it's delisted from the Steam store. It should be made clear, not every Steam game has DRM. There are some games you can purchase on Steam that do not require Steam to launch. There are also games that you can buy on Steam with their own DRM, like certain Ubisoft games with their Connect service. Over the last 20 years, Steam has gone from this hindrance to playing one of the most hyped and acclaimed games of its time to far and away the largest digital distributor for PC games with 132 million active users. As of 2013, they had 75% of the market share, and I'd speculate that they probably have about the same today, even factoring in other major distributors like GOG, itch.io, and the Epic Game Store. It's hard to determine their market share, though, because they do not provide sales data to the general public. Beyond the DRM matter, Steam has not been without controversy. One such controversy is the cut that they take on every game sale. Valve typically gets a 30% cut on game sales. I say typically because since 2018, games on Steam that surpass $10 million in revenue get the cut reduced to 25%. Games that make $50 million get it reduced to 20%. But typically, 30% cut on game sales. And they argue that's the industry standard. And that's certainly true for the console market. But notably, the Microsoft Store and Epic Game Store currently take a flat 12% cut, which was a direct response to Valve's practices. And while Steam has made it easier than ever, especially for smaller developers to release their games on a massive platform, and offers a number of developer tools and features, it's built up a reputation among developers for being fairly hands-off in terms of material support. This, coupled with the high ceiling to get that percentage cut reduced, makes it a platform that tends to favor more successful publishers. When Gabe Newell announced Steam, he pitched it as a way for independent developers to make more money from their creations. Valve was certainly able to achieve that dream for themselves. They escaped the publisher that took advantage of them, and they made their own distribution platform. And while they may not be as awful as Vivendi was, they certainly wield a dangerous amount of power and influence over the video game industry. Several of their practices are anti-consumer and anti-developer. And look, Valve is neither an unambiguous beacon of light, nor are they a complete pox on the world. They have positioned themselves in a way that offers immense convenience to customers while also holding immense power over them and other video game publishers. Trent Oster of Beamdog Entertainment once described Gabe Newell as a benevolent dictator, and I don't think that's a bad description. Steam offers the masses some creature comforts while still taking the form of an inherently unfair system that benefits them above everybody else. Yes, there is peace within the kingdom, and the alternatives are either worse or underserved, but that doesn't make their system fair or just. Steam could be worse. God knows they could be worse. We've seen what worse looks like, but they could be doing better too. In conclusion, Steam is a land of contrasts. Anyway, here's how you can still play Half-Life 2 today. If you have the Xbox 360 version of the Orange Box, the compilation of games that includes Half-Life 2 in it, you can still play that on your Xbox One and Series X and S. It's backwards compatible. A Mac OS version of Half-Life 2 and its episodes were released worldwide on May 26, 2010, and a Linux version was released on May 9, 2013, so you can play the game on not just PC, but also Mac and Linux. Exclusively on Steam, mind you, but still. It's only been made more abundantly available since it originally released 20 years ago. And unlike most games released 20 years ago, this is a game that is still actively supported by its publisher. In November of 2024, Valve released a massive update to Half-Life 2 to celebrate the game's 20th anniversary. Some things included in those updates, Episode 1 and 2 are now included within the base game instead of separate titles. The game finally has Steam Workshop support, which allows people to install user-created content. You don't even need to close the game to do it. You can do it within a menu while running the game. There have been meticulous bug fixes, quality improvements, and cut content restoration. They restored the original launch blood and fire effects, which can be toggled on and off at any time. Restoring cut content, huge deal. They rebalanced lighting to account for people playing with HDR on or off using the original release as a reference. And they also released a developer's commentary mode with 3.5 hours of audio from the original developers. This is a huge deal, and it is genuinely impressive to see a company choose to update a 20-year-old game, especially a single-player one. This is something that they could have nickeled and dimed people for a re-release, but people who already own the game got to benefit from this. They released the game free for that weekend, and even now, if you don't own the game, you can purchase it at any time for no more than $10. But it'll have to be on Steam, though. So, in terms of availability, would I give Half-Life 2 an A? I spent a lot of time talking about DRM, and the point of all that was to say that video game ownership on Steam is murky. And this is the game that we have to thank for that. I own Half-Life 2 for as long as Steam exists, and anything could happen. Moreover, they have the power to change the game in any way that they like. As the notes for the recent update showed us, they've updated this game over the years in ways that have subtly altered it over time. You're at the mercy of someone else's whims. So while the game is absolutely accessible, even more so than it was at launch, I'm going to have to give it an A*, because anything could happen. I love Valve's games, but I don't love that they have the power to, at any time, change every Steam copy of Half-Life 2 into a PNG of a turd. Look, it runs on a source engine. The game can run on basically any computer. I first played this game on a hand-me-down laptop my dad gave me for Christmas in 2009. If you have Steam, check this game out. I'd be genuinely surprised that you don't already own it somehow, but check it out. It's not just a monumentally important video game, it is a very good one. Half-Life 2 holds a 96 out of 100 on review aggregation website Metacritic, making it the most critically acclaimed game of 2004 and the 16th most critically acclaimed game of all time on the website. It won the Game of the Year at the BAFTA Game Awards, the DICE Awards, the Game Developers' Choice Awards, as well as at publications like Edge and Eurogamer and IGN. But we're not here to reduce the legacy of Half-Life 2 to its review scores, sales figures, and accolades. We're here to discuss what this game means to the people who played it. So let's get into it, Anthony.
Journey to distant realms. Explore the furthest reaches of the universe. Survive deadly dangers. Experience matters of the heart and more in a new actual play podcast. Join me, Audrey. That's right, just me, as I play tabletop games designed for one player. From journaling games to tarot games to even games that take me outside, I'm bringing you along for the ride. Join me for every episode of Alone at the Table.
What do you like about this game? And what does it do that you wish more video games would do?
I love the physics. I love being able to pick stuff up and throw it at people. I love being able to like stack stuff and get myself to like a vantage point that I couldn't get to without like stacking those things. Like I love the interactivity of the world. That like I wish there were more games that had that type of like manipulation built into them. I brought up like Halo as like one of my favorite games. If Halo had like a mechanic where you could like, well, I guess one of the newer ones does with Halo Infinite. Like you could like pick stuff up and like throw it at people. There's like a grappling hook ability, but there's like nowhere near like to like the level of like interactivity of like being able to like pick up crates and like stack them around and like doing like stuff like it's just so much fun.
Mm-hmm.
I also love the environmental storytelling. like as a storyteller, like with my own work, like there's stuff in this game that like really gets me thinking about how I can push those elements in my own work. Still, like one of the like most standout moments in this game, storytelling wise, to me, is the ocean levels as you drive on the coastal levels in the buggy, and you're looking around and like slowly realizing like, oh, there's something not right here. Why doesn't the water reach any of the docks? Why are all these boats like half buried in the sand? Like, what's going on here? And you start to like realize, like, whether like consciously or not, that like, oh, this alien empire that's taken over the world is like also like fucking up the world. Like they're pillaging its resources, and you see that earlier in the game when you go through the canals and like it's all polluted and like full of like radioactive gunk. But it's never like there's never a character that like says like, oh yeah, they're sucking up the oceans. Like it really is like stuff that's just there for you to figure out on your own.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, one of my other favorite moments is at like Eli's lab, when you have like that moment just to like look around and like mess around with stuff in the lab, and you look at the cork board, and there's like all these like newspaper clippings, and like it mentions like the 7-hour war, and like Dr. Breen is in control now, and like you pick up more of this story, this like the state the world's in. Like I think that stuff is really cool.
Yeah. We talked earlier about how it teaches you things visually.
Yeah.
It does invisible tutorials, right? You talked about Ravenholm, but in chapter 3, it's just invisible tutorial after invisible tutorial after invisible tutorial. You encounter barnacles early on in chapter 3, which are these ceiling creatures with long tentacles. And when something gets attached to that tentacle, it sucks it up and eats it. And it demonstrates that by having a raven fly into a tentacle, and then it'll eat the raven, and it'll make sure you see that, or try its best to see it. It can't control like a person just like willfully looking away from it, but this is to teach you like that's a barnacle, that thing's going to eat you, that's dangerous, don't fuck with it. Later, you run into a cluster of them next to a group of barrels, and one of the barrels will fall down a slippery slope, and you'll see one of the barnacles try and eat the barrel. And then a moment later, you'll see flammable barrels. And then you start to do the math of like, okay, it'll attach itself to a barrel, and these barrels will literally explode. And then you test it out, and sure enough, it'll eat the flaming barrel, and it'll explode, and then it kills them. It's just teaching you things without somebody like calling you on a comms and being like, hey, listen, have you considered like maybe using something flammable to dispatch multiple barnacles at once? It's just conveying information to you visually rather than textually or through exposition. The story's doing that, but also it's conveying gameplay.
It's gameplay itself, yeah. Like it really is like a masterclass in visual communication.
And to that point, the HUD is so minimal because it wants you to see as much as possible. It's not trying to just give you information overload. The most it'll do is it'll give you your health and your ammo at the bottom right corner of the screen. And I feel like they brisked at even doing that because the reticle for most of your weapons will have like a little meter go down for your ammo and a little tiny meter go down for your health.
I never noticed that until this time I replayed it, was that like there's that like little meter on your reticle that shows your ammo, and then there's even like an audio cue when you're on your last like bullet or like you're about to be out of ammo. Like it's very cool like how much stuff is just kind of it's there like in these like very subtle ways, and like yeah, it's so good. It's so good.
Like I don't think you have health for it. I think the first 2 chapters of the game. So anything that happens to you, you're just looking around, and since especially in your first playthrough, this is all new to you. You're just trying to interact with anything at all because you don't have any weapons. You can't hurt anybody. But like those first 2 chapters are just so important for you absorbing information, and they don't give you a HUD. You have like the tiniest reticle in the world down the center, just so you have a way to center the screen. But you're just looking at City 17 to take in like, what is this world like? And you're pressing E or whatever the interact button is to pick things up and throw them so you can get your bearings. Because you talked about the puzzle where you have to get the ramp up using flotation devices and how they set that up by having a different puzzle where you have to put cinder blocks onto a sort of big teeter-totter thing to get yourself up there. Before you even do that, in the first chapter, you walk past a kid's playground, and there's a little playground, and it has
the seesaw.
It has a seesaw, and there are a couple cinder blocks by it, and you can put the cinder blocks on the seesaw, and it'll go up and down. Obviously, there's no material benefit to it, but it sets that up before it even sets up the thing that sets up another puzzle. It's just doing tiny little things and planting seeds in your head from the very beginning by just letting you pick up objects and giving you the whole, like, the world is your oyster. Basically anything that a human being could realistically pick up, you can freely pick up. Yeah, there's another one where, like, in chapter 3, a resistance member opens a secret door for you and manhacks come flying out, and those tiny, like, little bird-sized robots that whir and get in your face and try and slice you open. That character will take out a lead pipe and try swatting at them with it instead of using his gun, and that's sort of like cluing the player in, like, maybe use your crowbar to dispatch these enemies instead of using a gun, because your gun can eventually take them down, but it's just much more efficient, especially
they're a lot harder to hit. Yeah.
Just hit them like you would a baseball. It's much better. And if you missed that cue, you'll later end up in a tunnel that is comically filled with just a bunch of flammable barrels around you, and if you just start shooting madly while the manhacks are flying at you, you'll accidentally blow yourself up. So you just have to use your crowbar. It just tries to drill that into your head that there's a better way of doing it without somebody stopping the game and being like, you can't do that, or even denying you the chance of killing them with a bullet. It's just great. Everything's invisible, but everything is taught to you without, again, taking control away from the player, or just taking the realization moment, the aha moment away from them.
Yeah, like it's so much rewarding when you can figure that stuff out on your own, and they help you figure it out on your own. And like, there's nothing that ever makes it feel like too much it's more immersive because of that too. Like, it never feels like a video game tutorial. It really does feel like you are pushing your brain in these, like, little ways, and then those eventually manifest in, like, these big aha moments, these big, like, physics puzzles that you figure out.
Yeah.
It's really cool.
Yeah. To your point about immersion, like, that total commitment to immersion you mentioned earlier, like, there's no cutscenes in a traditional sense. Every time the game stops and exposits to you, for the most part, you have control. You talked, like, in Kleiner's lab, you're able to interact with this tiny little teleporter or just knock things over. You can mess with things while they convey important information to you that sets up the next sequence. Like, even the beginning thing where the G-Man is telling you to, like, rise and shine or whatever, that's all done in engine. Like, it's committed to that. And the game, except for the loading screens, which the loading screen is literally just the game pausing in place, putting the word loading over whatever you were doing, and then continuing. Except for that, it's just basically one long unbroken shot.
Yeah, which is, like, really funny to think about the first game also being that, except for, like, the one point where you get knocked out, and then you get to the end of the game, G-Man scoops you up, and then immediately you're, like, back to it in the next game. Like, Gordon Freeman's going nonstop for, like, days on end.
For him, it's just like a really upsetting 24 hours.
Yeah.
20 years happens, but it's like, imagine you clock into your shift, it's like 6 p.m. and you're in Zen just going, what the fuck is happening? And then you finally finish. A guy's like, yoink. 2 seconds later, it's 20 years later, you're on a different train and you get off and it's like, I haven't had a lunch break yet. I haven't pissed. Gordon Freeman has never pissed. We've never seen Gordon Freeman take a snack break or anything.
Well, we don't know the capabilities of the suit. It might use that for coolant.
Oh yeah. Every time he's, like, refueling his health, it's also just sucking his piss out of him.
Yeah, it's like it's got, like, a drain.
Fair enough. I didn't factor in the suit, but it's just like, it's just committed to, like, immersion to the point that it's not trying to, and like, it's not just about, like, not taking control away from the player. It's just, like, committing to the player character perspective, which is just why this game still feels so one of a kind, even though so many games imitate it and its structure and its design principles. Like, it's great that the developers are so open about this process, because this is such an important game, and it's important to give even the layman who aren't video game developers, like a sense of understanding about how these things are made and how they work beyond like narrative development, but also video game development and why things are the way they are. But it's so cool because despite all that, it has not lost its originality. The God of War reboot will do the one long unbroken take thing that this game was already doing and what Half-Life 1 was already kind of doing. But this game's commitment to immersion, specifically in a first-person space, the way characters talk to you, the way they tutorialize to you without having to say, press this button, do that thing. It's a game that feels natural, despite how supernatural everything around it is. And I think that's part of its appeal is like people feeling immersed, that they create that connection that people have with these characters and the stakes.
Well said.
I hope so. I was just like so excited talking about everything. And it's great because like the other thing with that developer commentary, I don't know if in your most recent replay you turned on the developer commentary settings.
I've been watching some clips of it on YouTube. It's very fascinating for them to like get these like, because the documentary was like such a great like overview of the whole project, but to get these like very specific thoughts from the developers on these like specific areas they worked on, and like it's such a cool feature to like have in the game now.
It's great. I love it, and I hope more video games do it because it's been a staple of other Valve games and even other Half-Life titles. The episodes did them. Lost Coast, the expansion level that they added to do a little tech demo for, that had it, but Half-Life 2 proper never had one. And I'm glad that this most recent update that they did for the 20th anniversary added that, because this specific artifact just did so much to change the world with the proliferation of Steam and the source engine and everything like that. But just seeing like how the fundamentals of the game design work, there's a scene in the first chapter, like right before you talk to Barney, where they're talking about how they took inspiration from Eco for the animation. And Eco looks completely different from Half-Life 2, which is trying to do this naturalistic realism and doing so much for the facial modeling and the capturing. But they were talking about how the animation was so important with Eco and how the way that those characters were animated made them feel real and made the relationship between the two characters feel real. And even though if it's not a game about a boy with horns holding hands with a radiantly white woman, elf character, it's taking influence from that by how they are developing your relationship with characters like Barney and Alex especially.
Yeah, it's really impressive how like with such few moments you actually interact with like the actual characters in the story, how like memorable and like likable they are. It's very impressive. I do think the animations play a huge role in that. It was very interesting in the documentary when they talked about the moment when like Alex stopped feeling like a doll and started feeling like a person, and there was something about like the movement of the eyes, like these like subtle little, because like we communicate in like so many ways besides just our words, like communicate through our body language, or like micro expressions on our face, that like to actually incorporate that into the character, it must have been such a eureka moment when like it clicked for them.
Yeah.
I talked to Dr. Kleiner. His portal was almost working again. If he's managed to repair it, we'll end up there. If he hasn't, well, we couldn't be any worse off.
It's not worth the risk, Alex. I can't lose you. Get out while you can.
We're not leaving here without you. That's final.
We can't leave Judith here either.
Don't worry, Dad. We'll find her. For now, I'm going to send you to the teleport chamber. I'm not saying goodbye, Dad. We'll meet you there.
I know you will. I'll see you there, baby.
Video game and voice acting, especially leading up to that point, had always been this very this big struggle. Not just because at first it was like amateur voice actors or literally the developers or the localizers doing the voice acting instead of seasoned veterans, but also because like even if you did get seasoned people, the stuff that they're working with there is very, very limited. and this isn't the first game that does motion capture, voice acting, or anything like that. But it is a game that's taking that and also like creating this model that feels so expressive. It is definitely like Uncanny Valley if you get really close in their face. But imagining this, playing this at the time in 2004 on a nice computer and just getting like, what the? That is a person that I'm talking to. Their eyes are following me. They're emoting towards me. I can feel not just the warmth in their voice, but like the warmth of their mannerisms and their expressions, the anguish and the pain and the hurt. That's such an incredible thing. It helps endear us to these characters, but it also makes us feel so separated when we're in action sequences fighting the Combine Overwatch and all that, because they're all deliberately masked. Because if you did have graphics that great and you're shooting down humans at the time, that would feel so icky and gross. And it's just a very good visual shorthand of like, these are the bad guys, these faceless bureaucratic police force versus like these humans that you are invested in saving and protecting.
Yeah, it reminds me in Star Wars, I believe like they wanted the stormtroopers to be, even though there are like people in like the Empire that like don't have like helmets on, it was deliberate that like the first like bad guys you see are these like faceless bad guys.
Yeah,
because it's this like extra like shorthand just for like, oh yeah, these are not quite human, at least in like spirit. It's interesting.
Yeah. Also, gravity gun, great weapon.
Yeah.
That and a portal gun within the same decade, just what a run. That super gravity gun finale where it's like, all right, we're done teaching you. We know y'all hated Zen. Let's make this finale a fun one. Let's make this a great time. This last chapter is just you blasting anything that comes in your way or being able to pick up anything regardless of size and throwing it at another guy. You can pick up a Combine soldier and then hit another Combine soldier with a Combine soldier. It's a great time.
Yeah, it's so cool. Like, I think in like either the developer commentary or like the documentary, they say like, oh yeah, like you're God now. And like, it's like, yeah, like you really do, like you have like all this power just to like manipulate objects in a way that you couldn't before, manipulate people in a way you couldn't before. Like it is like this grand finale, especially after doing the whole Strider battle in like the finale of like City 17 right before that. Like that is like such a tough sequence. Like I died so many times replaying it this time around that like it was really nice to just to like have fun with the physics, like purely with the physics after that.
It's like a reward.
Yeah, talking about elementary school experiences, this is, all right, you passed the test and you all did a great job, so here's the ice cream party at the end. And you're just blasting people with the super gravity gun. But even before that, I replayed the game. I didn't mean to replay most of the game. I meant to just like get my bearings. But after chapter 3, I just kept playing and playing. It's because I wanted to get to Ravenholm, because Ravenholm's just one of the best chapters in any video game ever. The lead up to it and an actual progression through it was really good. And I wanted to get the achievement on Steam where you get through Ravenholm using only the gravity gun.
Yeah.
And boy, does that make it so much scarier.
Yeah, I bet.
Like halfway through, Father Gregory is just a great one-off character.
Oh my god.
God, I could do a whole episode on Ravenholm. They almost did a whole Ravenholm video game, apparently. So.
Yes, yeah, it was going to be a Opposing Force sequel. They bring back, was it Shepard from that one?
Yeah.
Yeah.
But halfway through, Gregory gives you a shotgun, which is supposed to make it so that you can easily dispatch the runners, which are xenomorphic head crab people. It's so fucking scary, and every time they lunge at you and make a noise, it's the scariest thing in the world, on top of the variants of the head crabs coming at you. Handling all that with only a gravity gun makes it a legit survival horror game.
Yeah.
It's scary, but I got the achievement.
Hell yeah. Yeah, that's another thing I love about the game is like the variety of enemy types that you encounter throughout it. Kind of like with the way we were talking about, like the way they introduce like the physics puzzles more subtly. They introduce like the enemies at these like varying degrees, like they ratchet them up in like a very like organic way, where like at first they're just running at you with clubs, then you get a pistol, so they start using guns, or they're using guns on you, then you get a gun, you can start fighting back. Then they start coming out with machine guns, and then you start encountering like tougher soldiers, and then with the zombies, like there's the normal zombies you encounter first, and then you start encountering like the fast zombies, the poison like hunchback zombies. Like it's cool the way like there's all this variety. That's the honestly it's the one thing that like, but compared to like the original game, first Half-Life, that like I wish there was more weird alien wildlife throughout the game, which I know like in earlier builds of development they had like more of like the Zen life in the canals of the city or like on the outskirts, and for whatever reason it was ultimately cut in the end. If I had to make like a wish to the developers, it would have been like, oh yeah, give me some more aliens.
That's a good segue to ask, what do you wish this game did better?
It's a good question. You know, I wish there were a few more moments where it really feels like the revolution is turning around, like story wise. I like on this replay, I found it very strange that when you go to Nova Prospect, which is one of like the most satisfying like sequences in the game, when you're like storming the beach and you have this whole like antlion army backing you up. I do think it's very strange that like once you get inside the prison, you don't like release any of the other prisoners. Like you're just there for Eli.
Yeah.
And I'm sure there's like, I mean, this game is not shy of its like troubled development history. So I can't be that upset about it. But I feel like that would have been so much more satisfying is if you weren't just rescuing Eli, you were also like freeing all these other citizens and like starting a whole prison riot. Because right after that, when you go through the teleport, you get back to City 17, a couple weeks have passed, and you wind up in Dr. Kleiner's lab. And he says that like the battle at Nova Prospect was like the spark that lit the fire of the revolution. I feel like it would have made it a lot more impactful if like you didn't just get Eli out of there, like you really got a bunch of people out. Like story-wise, I feel like that would have made that like revolution that comes after you come out of the teleporter like make a lot more sense, and like would have made like, I don't know, extra satisfying to me.
Yeah. All art is the struggle against limitation, and video games especially, you can see the limitation when you consider the time. You think about in Fallout New Vegas and Skyrim, there's like these big epic battles, and then you zoom out and it's like it's 7 or 8 NPCs against 7 or 8 NPCs.
It's all framing. It's all like the way that it makes it feel like a battle instead of it actually being a real big battle.
Yeah, like the big battle at the one of the climactic battles in Skyrim is just a dozen guys. And it's fine because again, we know why the engines are so limited and there's only so much you can do. And this is a 2004 game that's already doing so much with bodies and things of that nature. And it feels like a thing where they sort of write themselves into a corner anyway, because the whole Nova Prospect, you destroy all of the things keeping the antlions out of it. And there's only the one teleporter out, and the one person that knew how to use it dipped with Eli.
Yeah.
And it's just like, I guess it wouldn't have made sense that it wouldn't have made, like, there'd be a million questions if a bunch of people were free. And then
I don't know, you start handing out bug bait, you know, give them the little pods, like, hey, this is how you use them.
Yeah.
But no, like, yeah, like, no, there's so many things that like could have been in this game had the developers been given like more budget, more time, more just better computers. Like,
yeah, not to mention the fact that, you know, the game struggles to render many NPCs at a time, and they make that the emergent thing that came up in development with that is like most of the population has been wiped out. There are no kid NPCs because there's a suppression field that keeps people from procreating. That comes up in one of Rainer's Big Brother speeches he gives on the monitors, that we took away your ability to, you know, reproduce and everything because that was a distraction, and we're here to evolve. And it's propaganda. He's just
it is interesting how like these like gameplay limitations or just creative limitations actually help inspire storytelling within the world.
Yeah.
It's very fascinating how that comes about.
Yeah, it's a thing where the form, what is it called? The medium is the message, at the end of the day. You run into a problem and you write around that problem. That's been budget filmmaking, that's storytelling, and especially in video games, this is what becomes the emergent part of it. It makes it a little funny when you get to the part where there is the revolution and there's only 3 to 4 people joining your team at a time, and then like 3 of them die, but then 3 immediately come around the corner. It's like, we're with you, Freeman. So it never feels like you're completely alone, but it is a thing where it's like there's a dwindling population anyway. It's not going to be a 1 million person uprising against another million NPCs.
Yeah, and there's enough like little scripted events or like explosions in the distance that like at least give you a illusion that like more stuff is going on. But yeah, like if you actually like look at like what's going on in the moment, if you do like a little boundary break and take the camera wherever, like you realize how small scale everything really is.
For sure. One thing that people complain about is like the lack of weird alien weapons compared to Half-Life 1, or the lack of not lack of enemy variety, but like a lot of the enemies from the previous games are just totally gone, like the Zen dogs or like the giant golem creatures. But it's an understandable thing because the scope creep. You read about the production of this game and it's like it's a miracle it came out. They were hemorrhaging money. They were going bankrupt. They're in a lawsuit with Vivendi, and the leak happened and everything like that. And it's like the game kind of came together in the last few months, and that's why the last 2 chapters kind of feel rushed relative to the rest of the game. You have to make your priorities, and their priorities was like, okay, we don't have a lot of cool guns, but we gave you one really cool gun that literally can throw anything it wants at it, and here's a couple other guns too that are varying degrees of cool.
I didn't realize how easy it was to miss the crossbow when I was replaying it this time around. Yeah, it's like tucked away on like a little hill, and the only reason I realized I missed it this time around was because I got to there's like a combine soldier like standing on a billboard, and there's an achievement for pinning the guy to that billboard with the crossbow. I was like, wait a minute, I didn't pick up the crossbow. Where is it? So I had to I backtracked and drove around. I was like, oh damn. But like there'll be like other ones that like show up later in the game, or like you'll find one hidden somewhere. But I always thought that was like really cool how like the game again like isn't that like handholdy with like making sure you find all these weapons. Like some of them you actually do need to do a little bit of exploration and find them.
It genuinely shocked me this recent playthrough how quickly a new gun is thrown at you in the first half, 2/3 of the game. Like I think like there's a chapter where you have like 2 to 3 different gun varieties given to you. It's nuts. And it also is a thing where after you're given like the better pistol, like you get I think it's a 357 that like just one shots most enemies, the revolver. And then you get like the combine machine gun instead of the shitty submachine gun. You're like, man, the original pistol and the SMG, there's just no reason to ever use those ever again. And they actually kind of suck.
Yeah, the only like times I wound up using those was if I like literally just was like out of ammo. Like in Ravenholm, when you're in Ravenholm, like you start using some of those shitty guns again. Or like even like later in the game, like if like I would just like was careless and like ran out of ammo and like my good guns, like I was like, oh yeah, I forgot I have these from the start of the game.
Yeah, but like I think the game, by the time you get to Ravenholm, it's like just use the gravity gun anyway, because I got through all of Ravenholm using just the gravity gun.
Yeah.
At no point are you like out of things to chuck at people. A lot of enemy encounters you can just barrel through unless they block you physically from the exit anyway. But yeah, that is a thing. A couple of the guns just straight up suck, especially once you get further along and you feel a little bit more powerful. But the game also does a really good job of just like keeping you on your back foot a little bit with the power fantasy. Like you said, that you become a god with a super gravity gun at the end. But up until that point, it never gets to a point where you ever feel overwhelmingly powerful. It does sell, again, the sort of grounded nature of this sad apocalypse where humanity's petering out, and like you feel immersed in this world and everything like that, but you're not super powerful, and you don't feel like Freeman is an especially powerful man or anything like that. You could die at any moment because you pressed the wrong button or you didn't change your weapons quickly enough.
Yeah, no, for real, you just slip. Then there's that bit when you're like crawling under the bridge, and like you're like literally just like crouching along, making sure that you don't like move too fast and like fall onto your death. It is interesting, like how like the game doesn't feel like too much of a power fantasy, even though like you are in a suit, you have like a super suit, you have all these guns, you are still very vulnerable. And it's like it is easy to get overwhelmed by enemies, and like the AI, like the way like a lot of the enemies are programmed in this game is very good.
Yeah. It's a stressful game. Like, even replaying it just feels stressful, even though, like, I literally watched a documentary and they told me how the AI works and how, like, they are designed to not shoot you at once. Only a limited number of people can be shooting at once, and the other ones are doing suppressing fire to make it seem more scary.
Yeah,
It's still like, yeah, it works though. It works.
yeah.
I have a monkey brain. I don't know what to tell you. You've played the expansions. What are your thoughts on the other Half-Life games?
Yeah, I love the original Half-Life. I'm trying to remember if I've actually finished that one. I think I have.
Zen is a rough hang. I have beaten
Yeah, that's the
Half-Life 1,
thing.
but Zen is
It's
a rough
like
hang.
that last like third of it is like it's tough. I know the original Half-Life. I always loved replaying the early sections of the game for whatever reason. I always found those like really fun. I haven't played Blue Shift or Opposing Force. I've watched like playthroughs of those. I never played. What was like there was like a 2-player one, like Decay, I think it was.
Oh yeah, the one that was for consoles.
Yeah, I never played that one. I actually love Lost Coast. Lost Coast is like such like it's like a little short fun adventure, but like it's got so much like character to it, like with the fisherman guide that like shows you into the city. And then just like that design of like the city and like that fight in the church, and then like fighting the helicopter outside, and then like literally like you like take that little elevator down, you're like right back where the adventure started. Like it's such like a fun little short experience. The episodes I really like. Episode 1 feels like what you wanted the revolution at the end of 2 to like, if not be like at least include. Like it feels like there's a lot more like of that like war going on.
Mm-hmm.
And then episode 2 I love. I think I like episode 2 more than Half-Life 2 in a way.
Yeah.
Like I love the environment and like going through these like just like it feels like such an odyssey because you are like taking the car everywhere.
Mm-hmm.
Like it's this like road trip, and you're like stopping off at these like different resistance spaces and like fighting these enemies, and like the whole like sequence when you're like, going through like the mines and like fighting the ant lions was so cool. And then like the final battle at the end of that one where like you're driving around like taking down the Striders. It's so fun and satisfying. And then like emotionally, like the impact of the story ending of that one was like it hits. Like it's very well done. And then even like the teases to the Half-Life 3 or episode 3 that like may or may not be with like the Borealis and like the tie-in to Portal. Like it was like one of those like first like franchise moments I could remember where it's like, oh my god, there's like a whole universe and this is crossing over with this other project. Like it was like, this is cool. Because I think there was like moments in Portal 1 where like you could like look into like an office and there's like earnings reports comparing like Aperture to Black Mesa.
Yeah.
So there's like oh, like there's something going on here, and then like you see that in episode 2, they're like, oh my god, yeah, there is something going on here.
Yeah, like Still Alive, the song at the end of Portal references Black Mesa by name.
Yeah. I've played bits of Half-Life Alyx at a friend's. It was a while ago. I don't have a VR setup of my own.
Who does?
Yeah, that's the thing. But it's so fucking cool. The only reason I probably haven't like sprung on like a VR system is just because there's not more companies like Valve making VR games.
Right.
If there's just more like developers making stuff to that quality, I feel like VR would be like a much bigger draw for people. But like that game is like one of the only VR games I've played where like I was legitimately blown away. And granted I haven't played too many, but I feel like most of the ones I have played like have felt more like fun little mini games, like little demos, stuff that like if it was at like an arcade experience would be satisfying, but because it's supposed to be these like home experiences, like there feels like there's something lacking in a lot of VR.
Yeah.
But Alex, from what I did play, was like I was blown away. I would love to actually get the chance to play that one all the way through.
Yeah, I think like VR should be something that internet cafes and arcades should be taking advantage of as a way for people to play games. I know that Half-Life Alyx being a narrative game means like somebody would have to dedicate a lot of time in a public place to do that. But I've been trying to like beat my head against the wall, trying to be like, how can we make this accessible? Because I have a video game podcast and I don't feel strongly about having a VR headset at this moment because there's also no, besides Half-Life Alyx, that's the only time I really was like, I might get one. But no, if you, brave listener, want to mail me a VR headset to talk about Half-Life Alyx, I'll happily do it. But I don't, otherwise I'm just like,
Yeah.
shrug.
Yeah.
It's a thing where like, look, Half-Life 2 is immersive and I have 2 monitors and one of the monitors is just a Google Doc saying, good video game, huh? So I can't imagine putting on a VR headset where I'm literally lost in that world and there's a head crab jumping up at me and I'm in a 5 foot by 5 foot space.
Terrifying.
I would accidentally hurt somebody. I can't do it. But if you mailed me it, I might. All right. So wonderful game, Half-Life 2. One of the best to ever do it. What impact would you say this game made on you personally?
Ooh. It definitely like introduced me to a lot of other like meaningful stories. Like 1984 was one that like I was able to like look into and appreciate more because of Half-Life, and like Half-Life 2, like the world like draws on that like dystopian setting quite clearly. Same thing with the book One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest. The whole idea of like the Combine is an idea that Ken Kesey kind of talks about with that book. In that book, it's kind of, he uses the term Combine to talk about society and the way it. How did he talk about it? He talks about it in like the sense of like the Combine is like the machine of society and how it like forces people and cultures to conform to it to better serve it, which is like how the Combine at like the Alien Empire and Half-Life is categorized. Those 2 books, like Half-Life 2 was like kind of a backdoor to introduce me to like literature that inspired it and then now like goes on to like inspire me now. Gameplay wise, it actually like the stuff we've been talking about, like the whole podcast about like the little subtle ways you introduce these concepts and like build up and like train the player before they're doing like more complex stuff with those tools. Learning about that in the documentary and like their thought process with that has been very influential in like the way I've approached my art now, especially like when I think about doing like longer form storytelling with comics. How you can subtly introduce concepts, visual cues, visual elements, and slowly build on that throughout the story. So that way, by the time you're doing like more complicated stuff later on, like the reader hasn't even realized it. So like it's stuff like it's definitely like influenced my creative mindset in a really cool way. We talked about like the way like video games kind of like train your brain in like these interesting ways. After replaying Half-Life a couple weeks ago, I was like walking around Savannah and I was looking at stuff in this like different way of like, oh, like I could pick that up if I wanted to. Oh, that's like
free will. I'm the free man.
Yeah, like you start thinking of like, it's such a weird way to put it, that like you can pick stuff up in the world.
Mm-hmm.
Like I don't like, it's such like a banal realization, but like after playing a video game, it like brings a different perspective and context to it. It's interesting.
I can pick up that can.
Yes.
Pick up, I can. This is something I have believed in for a while, but it's something that Half-Life 2 has reinforced experientially. World building is cool. Lore is cool. Cool that you have like encyclopedias and codexes and things like that in your story that you're telling. What matters to me personally is the human element, the feeling of the thing that matters so much to me. And Half-Life 2 is just really good at making its dystopian apocalypse feel real and lived in, and that these people are being subjugated. It's confusing, it's scary, and it's intentionally obfuscating information, which makes me feel like I am among the scared and the helpless and hopeless in the oppressive situations. And it makes it feel like it matters when I overcome this oppressive force that has lied and misled and tortured its remaining populace. It's like cool to like know things. It's great to see something be warped and changed and moved in front of me because of the emotions the work is making me feel. The idea that you don't really have to commit to a logic or rule because you haven't overly explained something, or you're not depriving something of excitement because you immediately deflate it by giving the in-world logical explanation or the encyclopedia. I like the imagination. I like to think about these things. I like to wonder what the fuck is up with the Vortigaunts in this game. That's all great. Like the Vortigaunts, they haven't explained super well. So when they have a new power that like helps in a plot device, like bringing Alex back to life twice in episode 1, it doesn't feel like it's cheaping out on me. I think it's twice, and she dies at the end of Half-Life 2, technically, and the Vortigaun's like, no, she didn't. And then there's a scene where she gets like stabbed through the chest, and she's like, no, she didn't. She's healed now. I healed her. If you don't explain everything about the Vortigaunts and their limitations, then you can do things like that, and it doesn't feel unfair necessarily.
Yeah, it leaves like the door open for the writers, the developers to like just keep playing with the toys in the sandbox.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it feels like kids playing in that way, in an exciting way, where you're just like, and I made up a reason to get out of this corner. Like they write James Bond films by like, oh, we got written into a corner. How would he get out of this? And then they write the gadget that got him out of that situation back into the beginning of the movie. So he has the gadget that gets himself out of that situation. That's game development, is James Bond magic watches and ties that turn into swords or whatever. But yeah, no, it's definitely like made me think about what I appreciate in storytelling and the worlds that are crafted around it in order to serve a story. Something I really love about Half-Life 2 is Half-Life and Half-Life 2 have maybe the best sound design in video games. The sound effects are iconic. The way that the sounds just make the way so like, oh, this is recognizable and it scares me and I can't quite see where it's coming from, but I know what that is because of the head crab. Or the way that like you kill a Combine soldier and the death sound is just like a flatline sound effect while you hear them like give out like this guttural death. Like that character's definitively dead if the ragdoll wasn't obvious.
Yeah, and like the feedback you get from the world is so satisfying and just makes the game that much more intuitive to play.
Mm-hmm.
Like it's one of those games where like you get into that flow state so easily, where you're not really thinking about like, did I kill that guy? It's like, oh, I heard that sound, so I know like he's dead. Like, so I'm just gonna move on to the next thing. And that thought happens in like half a second. Like you don't even realize like that you've like thought all that through. Like so much of the gameplay becomes subconscious. And I feel like there's something about Half-Life 2, like the way it's crafted, that like you get into that subconscious headspace and like flow state very, very easily.
Yeah, sound design is one of the most important parts of immersion. That's why ASMR works on the people it does. It sucks you in. And if you have great sound design, then it just like makes everything around you feel more believable and feel more real. Were there any other thoughts that you have about Half-Life 2 and its impact on you before I move on to the recommendation section?
It definitely like I guess it's more sort because of like Gmod, but it was like one of my first experiences with like role playing was through Gmod and like the Half-Life City RP that they had on like servers. And like I never played like Dungeons and Dragons growing up or anything like that, where like you were like literally like crafting a character and like acting as them in the game world. That was like my first experience with like that type of like role playing game. Was through Gmod but like through like the world of Half-Life. And like that was like one of the things that made me like fall in love with it. And like later when I actually did play D&D, like it was like I had already been there before, like, and done it in this totally different context, and totally different like gameplay system, but still the core of like that like role playing, crafting this character, like acting on like the intentions of that character that like you have remade and written. Like I first found that through the world of Half-Life 2, not necessarily Half-Life 2 the game itself.
Yeah, the source engine, Half-Life 2, Garry's Mod, that's all like a language unto itself that has shaped people's imaginations and has shaped like internet culture in far-reaching ways. It's Half-Life 2's like impact is like difficult to overstate because of that. Certainly games like Mario shape people's perceptions about a medium, but Half-Life 2 has literally rewired the chemistry of a generation, possibly 2 generations. So we'll see how Gen Alpha shapes out and Gen Z, and like obviously like the millennials that watched Garry's Mod videos too. We're all fucked up in the head because of a little bit of Half-Life 2, and that's really wonderful. Anyway, that's Half-Life 2. Before I let you go, do you have any recommendations for things people should check out if they like Half-Life 2? Any media whatsoever. It could be TV, film, radio, music, book, what have you.
Yeah, definitely One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest by Ken Kesey. It's a very interesting book on its own, but like if you're interested in like some of the story ideas that like Laidlaw put into Half-Life 2, some of his inspiration comes from that book. And I think it like brings some context to the Combine and Half-Life 2 that like I think a lot of like fans of the series would appreciate. Other recommendations, Civil Protection, the Machinima series by Ross Scott, is really funny. And it like plays with the world of Half-Life in a very fun way, an imaginative way. Other than that, no, I think that's all I got.
Totally fine. It's a one-of-a-kind work. It makes sense that we don't have a million recommendations for it.
Yeah.
Anthony, thank you so much for giving me so much of your time to talk about this great video game that we could talk for hours about and still not run out of things because it's just so monumental.
Yeah, for real. It's like bottomless the amount of stuff like your brain can get out of this series.
Absolutely. Before I end the episode, please promote the hell out of yourself.
Yeah, if you want to follow my work and like see whatever comics, toys, illustrations I'm putting out, my Instagram is the best place right now. It's at Mr. Running Man, all just one word, no underscores or spaces. Or you could go onto my website at anthonybarbara.com.
Awesome. Definitely check out his art. It's wonderful. Wonderful person, wonderful guest. Thank you again for making time to be here, and thank you so much for listening to this episode of Select and Start. Once again, I am your host, editor, and promoter Keifer. If you enjoyed this episode, please give the show a positive review wherever you're listening to this. Engagement helps the show, and your feedback will improve it. If you want to get more engaged, give the show a follow on Twitter at SelectPodStart and on Blue Sky at Select and Start. If you have thoughts about Half-Life 2 or any other games we've discussed, send a DM or leave a comment, and I will gladly read it on the show. You can also support me on Patreon. If you pledge at least $1 a month, you'll get early access to new episodes as well as extended episodes with exclusive content. That is on patreon.com/Keifer's Corner. You can find a link to that and the rest of my projects in the description of this episode. Select and Start is on the Moonshot Network, which is supported by its own Patreon. Find out more on moonshotpods.com. The art for this show is made by my best friend Avery Ott. You can follow him on social media with the handle at Avery Robin Ott. That's AVRY Robin OTT. The theme song was composed by Mike Petrie. You can check out the links in the description for both of their works as well as Anthony's. All right, I think that's it. HL2.exe has stopped working.
Oh, fiddlesticks. What now?